items. Now I'd like to bring to the stage our wonderful President Moez Yanayam, to bring greetings.
Thank you. Good evening. Stop here while you're still planning. Now, really, we're thrilled to see you all. Let me start with just an update. We tried to use artificial intelligence to program our dogs with nice weather. It didn't work. So we'll see what our artificial intelligence expert will say. But in all seriousness, thank you. Thank you for being here. You know, at UNF, we really pride ourselves to be a platform for thought leadership. But not just thought leadership. We really also pride ourselves to be a platform for free speech, for civil discourse, so that people can come here, speak freely, but also know and understand how to disagree in a very civil way. Hopefully we had an incredible panel for you and an amazing moderator. This is only the beginning. We're going to have more topics, and we welcome your suggestions. We put together a great committee that is organizing all the talks for this office. So please, if you have suggestions for topics, if you have suggestions for speakers, try us. We'll do everything we can. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen, for you and your team for doing this. Let's give him a big round of applause. This great panel.
Thank you so much, President Moez. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Dr. Georgette Dumont. Georgette is an associate professor and director of the Master of Public Administration program in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, which is in the College of Arts and Sciences. Georgette will introduce our panelists and get the program started. Georgette.
Thank you. It's been a fabulous job. Oh, Kristen.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what you're going to be.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for making it through the mist of the weather. And yes, we are working on that AI weather connection, and it's called function calling. And so we might get there someday, depending on. Yeah, we'll see what they say. We'll find out. So I would like to introduce our panelists. The first one is Nik Patel. He is a cybersecurity expert, and he is also on our board of trustees. So thank you very much. Dr. Josh Gellers. He's a colleague of mine in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, and he is the MAIA director, the Masters of Arts in International Affairs. And last and certainly not least, we have Dr. Xudong from the UNF School of Computing. So thank you all for hanging up here with me. Yeah, good morning. I appreciate it. And we want to start this conversation on generative AI. So we all know what AI is, it started back with spell check, and then as you're texting stuff, it's telling you what you want to finish the text with. That's a form of AI, but that's not generative AI. Generative AI is it creates something, and what seems to be unto itself, with some prompting, literally prompting from the user. And this has a large impact on both education and employment afterwards. And then there's this whole ethical framework that we're really going to have to dig into to make sure that AI is used in ethical ways. And we're going to touch on all of those 3 E's here tonight. So I would like to first start, because we're a higher education university, I'd like to first start with education. So whomever would like to go first, I'd like to battle it out, civilly battle it out. So in what ways can generative AI be leveraged to enhance learning experiences for the students at UNF and throughout higher education?
So I'll take a first stab as a non-educator in this. But I would say where it will really is in creating class content and special content. So for example, making course syllabuses. I don't know how long it takes you to make a course syllabus, but I'm presuming it takes a long time and you probably start from it's a big one because
Especially the first time.
Yes.
especially the first time. Now, give me a class syllabus on this, break it down into 20 days, give me quizzes, give me tests, give me everything. And then you can go from there. And then you can have, after the quizzes, probably could put some of these grades in the quiz and say, okay, student X got this, but missed out on this, what should they do? And AI can tell you, they can focus on this, focus on this. One thing that I think teachers and CAs could have done in the past, just way faster.
All right, so I have to ask, are you looking for another job? Because I don't know, that sounds pretty, I might try that out. Have any of you, or either of you tried out generative AI with syllabus creation or creating quizzes based off of material?
I have not yet, anyway, but thank you for the recommendation. I think one of the best ways in which AI can be useful in an educational setting is as a complementary tool for critical thinking. And so that way, for example, not to have the student generate the content and claim it as their own, which is the big sort of one of the ethical issues, but also more specifically to have them leverage it legitimately in the course of doing an assignment. And so they can use it as a partner. I had an assignment, for example, I talked about this morning, where I have students feed a prompt into ChatGPT or Bard, and then I have them critique the output. So they are not sort of submitting the output as their own, potentially intellectual property. But what they're doing instead is demonstrating that they understand the theory well enough so that they can, it's sort of a content mastery tool to illustrate that they understand it and that they are hopefully better than ChatGPT in understanding international relations theory.
Let's go.
Yeah, I haven't yet used the ChatGPT to create course materials, but I created course materials assignments, asking students to use ChatGPT for some purposes for their projects. So, but I think for instructors, certainly ChatGPT is helpful in that regard, especially on the panelists, but also for students, especially the students who have some difficulty, navigating on campus or navigating what's going on in the classroom. Use AI to take notes, for example, just speech to text software that I can download on the cell phone to help them take notes.
So what we've been discussing is a lot of course content and, dabbling with the students with some GPT. Yeah, GPT. How would you see students using generative AI for academic engagement and academic enhancement? So yes, there's understanding the theories, and you can just call that memorization and figure it out. But how do you take them to that next level? How would you get them to use critical thinking, deep critical thinking skills through the use of AI?
I think part of that will come naturally. So I'd start with think about Google searches. Don't really what you have to research. You kind of just figured it out. Think about natural learning models. It's built for ease of use. And so as kids want their students want to do less work and have the computer do it for them, they'll figure it out. The friends will tell them, oh, if you want to pass this class, if you don't want to do all the work, this is how the prompts you put in get you to where you want. I think there'll be a lot of self-learning. They'll be the first kids that really get there early. Like I think we talked about my daughter knows how to use a creative web. And she can tailor ChatGPT's responses so it looks very similar to what she writes. And the way, quick story, the way we did that, she first had to write an essay a while ago. And she wrote the essay, it was all hers, clean. Then I made her use ChatGPT to create her own essay. The way she did it was, her first prompt was just copy everything you asked her to do. Yep. And I said, all right, think about it. How do you make it look like that? So then she said, okay, write this essay for a sixth grader. Write it from the perspective of a girl. Write it from the perspective of somebody who doesn't like spiders. Please focus on this. After 8 prompts, we got it to 95% of what she wrote. But now she's got the model of what to put in the chat. So it's reverse engineered. Now, if she ever wants to do a project really quick, when I'm giving her, I don't let her use ChatGPT, but she can spit something out that looks remarkably like her work. And now she has told all her friends how to do this one. And I think that is how it really started myself.
I would add, there's a couple of things that I think Nick mentioned. One of them, and that is to try and make it generative, so to speak, by applying the tools that are going to be necessary to use in the future for deployment purposes. And so we are, in a sense, training people to become better prompt engineers. And that is a very useful skill that even academics use, right? When we were thinking about the difference between writing for a general audience versus writing for an academic one. Well, you have to learn the manner in which you can craft a question so that you can get the desired output. And then the other thing I was going to mention is something I've been toying with, that I was trying to get sort of a student project going on where we would focus on the output, not necessarily the input. The input would be pretty much what it is, but the output is where the creativity can occur. So thinking about how to visualize something in a way that only a generative AI could really, muster at that time, or to turn something like your daughter's essay into an original song made in the style of Van Halen. I mean, imagine submitting something like that as part of a creative activity. So I think the prompt engineering is a skill, but also thinking more imaginatively about what we want to get out of it as well.
Coming from the School of Computing, so we gave assignments, some of them are programming assignments where students to use a pick up programming language like to try it on Java to create a system that software is actually useful. So some of the students they actually build a Discord-based language learning where they implement a little system on a piece of application on Discord. A lot of students are using that for sure. But it would allow the user to speak to a computer and get that information with one language. And the user, whoever's using can pick another language, say, translate. So it gives you experience, and then talk to a computer in a language, let's say English, and then the process show Spanish, or you can talk back to the user. So it's kind of also using a ChatGPT, but not based on words, but sometimes based on some other techniques to wrap around to have another useful, helpful system.
What you're discussing is really AI as a tool to generate stuff that needs to be done. And every job has that. You have to, knowledge workers have to produce some knowledge. But what I'm really trying to dig into is how do we use AI to make students look at work critically? So when they look at something, they question it. So it's like that critical thinking, instead of just going, oh, this is the answer. Okay, this is what I'll go with. Because you all know that AI hallucinates. Hallucination for AI, for those of you who don't know, it's when it makes stuff up. So when AI is hallucinating, students need to be able to know that, all right, this might not quite be accurate. So how do we use it in a way that we can teach students questioning the output that they're getting?
I think questioning the output versus critical thinking was two different things. One is fact checking. Right? You can outsource fact checking, just make ChatGPT work with Bard, Bard work with ChatGPT, and hey, fact check each other, just, all right, we're good. But critical thinking, which is, okay, I have an answer, what do I do with this? Right, like, to be or not to be, right? What is that? Like, to think about that, and how you teach kids how to think. That's why I pay tuition for you guys. And how to fact check. But how do you get them to think?
I can share one example I showed in my Intro to AI class. So, if you use ChatGPT a while, you realize it's not very good at reasoning, logical reasoning. And they're trying to improve on that, of course, at GPT-4, GPT-5 in the future. Recently, so the example I gave my student is, okay, here's the prompt, and here's the GPT's answer, and see if you can spot where the problem is. And the problem I was using there is very simple. It says, we know that when the sun, if the sun rises, the poker closes. And if we know the sun, right? If we know if we know the rooster crow, then does the sun rise? That's the question. Then the ChatGPT will say yes. I'll give you 2-3 paragraphs answer. So logically speaking, if logic says if we know if P then Q, and we know Q, it doesn't necessarily give us P back. So that's where the error is. With one of the, in my intro to the AI class, one example, some of the students will be able to catch that and say that's the problem. While ChatGPT will give you say, okay, we give you a bunch of reasoning and disclaimer, all the paragraphs, but it was wrong.
So correlation versus causation.
Right. Causation. Right.
But
I think you can give them the same kinds of evaluative processes that we do and ask them to essentially get into the habit of being a professor and evaluating the output using a rubric and saying, if this were submitted by a student, here's your rubric, how would you grade this? What are the points that you think it does well? What are the points that you think it doesn't do so well? We know, for example, that right now, the text-based generative AI doesn't do a great job, can't even really cite, or if it does cite, it often hallucinates those citations. Have them go back and actually read what it's citing and then determine whether they think that it does a good job with the use of those citations. Because we are demanding that they use those citations properly, they should be able to make the same kind of judgments when they are receiving output from the generative AI.
But that's all fact checking, right? So I think one of the key questions you've got to ask yourself, what is thinking? What is rational thinking? So if you take a look at some of the people who say that AI can only take you so far because it's all based on previous material and it's not really learning, it's just combining different things and then spitting out an output. Well, that's what my 11-year-old does. And we call that learning. She goes to school, her teacher fills her with information, I fill her with information, I tell her to do something, she combines the two information, she spit it out, but because it comes out of her, we say it's thinking. That's what ChatGPT does. So when you say critical thinking, I think if it doesn't do it now, very soon, these algorithms, these learning large language models will think. And the question is, how do you determine when it thinks? Because I think it's then, or it will be then very soon. And so then it can do all these things that you've asked. And then you'll have a little question on hands.
Which is?
Which is that you've got, what do you need us?
Well, before we get to that part, I do want to get into the ethics part. So you guys are so if you teach students how to use the prompts correctly and they can get to 95%, what the paper would sound like, then how do we then look at academic integrity at a college level? So how do we have them start citing that they used AI? How would they cite that they used AI? Did they have to say what percentage of their paper was AI? What percentage was the prompts? Do you have them entering in the prompt? We all know that AI is vastly, every time people put stuff into it or more information that goes onto the web, it gets that much smarter. So at what point are we looking at students' work? And we had this conversation. At some point, you put in prompts and yes, generative AI will produce something, but it's producing things based off of those prompts. We keep prompting it. So at some point it goes from it's generative AI or it's you've prompted for 8 or more prompts to come up with this unique piece of work. Now, is that work yours or is it the AI? So how do we work all of this stuff in ethically in higher education?
Well, I see Linda Howell in the audience, so I would be remiss if I were not mention that UNF has been working on this through our generative AI working group. They've already developed some language that's available online. And the reality is where it is at present is you have three options. You can ban it in your classroom and say, if you use it, it's basically the equivalent of cheating, and you get a 0 and all that comes with that. You can say you can use it, but you need to properly cite it, and maybe there's some discussion about how much you attribute or you're able to use it. And then the third part is that you allow them to use it to a certain extent, as opposed to replacing whole assignments and things like that. That is also kind of a negotiation what needs to happen. But right now it's sort of a wild west for a lot of institutions of higher education, and so there are some top-level policies that are being developed across the country, across the world, and then there are, because of academic freedom, there are professors who are going to have their own say what happens in their classroom. I can say that from the academic point of view, there's a journal, for example, called Robonomics, which accepts wholly produced or partly produced journal articles made with ChatGPT or Bard or anything else. There are other journals that have explicitly barred that and probably will get run out of academia if you use it. So we're already seeing a line being drawn in sand, but I think that as it becomes more difficult to identify, which to your point about it being above and beyond our comprehensive ability to identify it, I think we're going to have to make these kinds of decisions. And I'd like to see a mix, to be honest. I wouldn't want to see an absolute prohibition. I wouldn't want to see, don't worry about assignments, kids. Now all you have to do is, play Minecraft all day and you're going to get a bachelor's degree. I think there's got to be something in the middle, but maybe some room for all three of those approaches.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends on the subject we're teaching and the assignment. Even teaching a class, we have multiple assignments. Some we can say open the floor, go last day, use whatever you want. There are some assignments when they say, okay, I use it. The other hand is, if a student is using ChatGPT to a degree, I think it's at least as a professor, I want to explain so that I want to make sure the student understands what he or she is getting from ChatGPT. So maybe add a little extra component, which is to present your work in front of the class. There is a part of that as a grade. Also, we have exams. Not all courses teachers give exam styles, but there are exams. So we can give exam in a closed source environment where students are now even use Google, for example. So it's different types of environments.
I think the one thing academia has, and not in academia, but businesses in general, have to worry about is we're creating it from a policy level. We'll research it, we have a committee group together, we create a policy, we disseminate policy, it takes time. People who are using this don't create policies, they just use it. So before we even thought about ChatGPT, there was a group of students already using it. There was no rules that didn't even know about ChatGPT. So now we're saying, okay, ban ChatGPT, ban Bard. At some point we'll say ban large language models, but soon they'll be small language models because we'll be able to get it from there. And so the ways to define it will always be catching up with the tools that people have, because once it's in the wild, they will use it first before we can make policy. And so when you're thinking about how to integrate it, it's tough to say, don't use it. To your point, it's going to be a hybrid of how do you best adapt. And some of the adaptations will be, as we said, create a paper, come present it in class, right? Because you're going to have to speak. Now, the presentation will be made by ChatGPT because it can make your speaking points and your PowerPoint slides and everything else. So you'll actually have to voice it. But some hybrid of it, but we'll have to, businesses, academic, will have to be creative in how to work within their policies that institutions set up versus what people are using. Because if you just wait for policy, you're always fighting last year's war, and you will lose last year's war.
And you bring up a great point. So the ethics are going to be institution by institution, whether they allow it, whether they don't allow it, or even classroom by classroom. And so if we bring this up from higher ed into state actors, countries, there is no one overarching global government to create a policy as to how far we can push what AI is able to accomplish. because we are only just scratching the surface. It's an AI revolution. They're just like there's the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution. This is a revolution, and we are just dipping our toes in trying to figure it out without having any kind of a overarching body that says where is too far. We have it in sciences when it comes to creating humans and creating life, but we've seen some issues with that. There have been some that have gone outside bounds. So what are some of these large ethical issues globally, and what are some ways that we can create a framework in which countries and individuals within those countries can utilize AI without going to whatever an agreed upon too farness is?
I will start with this question. Can you get every country to agree to anything? That's the answer. Sorry.
I think you just took away my job as an international relations. The international operations that can't happen. So, I mean, we already have a declaration that, that's soft law at the international level, which was rendered last week, I think, which sort of, like a lot of these early approaches to any kind of complex problem, specify the nature of the problem in broad strokes, talk about some things that generally countries can agree upon. But of course, that we talked about this morning, what we've already seen is a race to define the nature of those problems and to legislate them. And the EU is way ahead of us. We are, in the United States in 2023, we're working with executive orders and grant funding opportunities, and the EU has the AI Act, and it's already promulgated. So we are behind the 8 ball on that. And China is taking on their own strategy, which doesn't really gel with the AI Act from the EU, so they're going to be doing their own thing. So I think that I agree with Nick, certainly, that you're probably not going to be able to get everyone on the same page. I think the international community of people who work on AI ethics, they know what those issues are. They're issues about bias and transparency, the digital divide, explicability, things like that. That has been around for years now. But whether we can get everyone to agree on how to address them is a challenge that I think we're going to wind up seeing sort of balkanization of AI policy. There's going to be sort of an East, and there's going to be a West. And the United States and Europe are going to be the West, and China and Russia are going to be leading the East, and then India is going to do what's going advantageous for it, right? So, but I don't think we're going to see a global treaty. It's something, for example, like banning, we have treaties on banning the use of landmines, which are pretty universally thought of as a terrible instrument of warfare. I don't think we'll ever have something quite that specific, but I think what we're going to have are maybe regional treaties and things of that nature. But globally, because of how tied it is to profit, and the companies that are vying for supremacy in search and AI, I don't think that they're going to be playing in the same sandbox.
Yeah, I agree. Apparently there's geopolitical reasons behind all that. Then also, Angie mentioned data is the new volume. Of course, with volume, we have all that. But I think at the beginning of ChatGPT, Italy banned March. I want to say March, this year March, and then they were complaining about there's some data. They have a data protection something working with EU, and ChatGPT had to make changes to the software and changes to the agreement, and then a month later, Italy lifted the ban. Apparently, Russia, China, Iran still has the ban, so they review again global reasons. But secondly, other than government, there's also research community, scientists. It's kind of different, of course. But there's IEEE in computing. There's AAAI, the Association for Advancement in AI. There's IEEE, there's ACM, those big communities, and there's quote unquote no country borders within those communities. So they have code of ethics, and usually you will see the first couple of lines we have 20 to 25 anywhere in that amount of rules, and one rule says avoid harm. Just 2 words, avoid harm. It kind of sets the base for it. That's how you see the community of researchers and scientists. People kind of do that. Do whatever. But we abide these foundational rules, like Confucius saying, do no harm. Don't do it to you something. don't do it to others, something you don't want to be done to you. So things like that, really, lots of ethics kind of treat into computing ethics or AI ethics. You don't have to.
But I will take a bit of the opposition on that, right? So I agree with you, right? Those are the standards. But what will happen is it will be almost like an arms race. Think about nuclear energy. When it first came out, hey, we can have nuclear power and it's great. But then we told everybody else, listen, we'll just give it to you. Don't need you to make it by yourself. Trust us, we'll protect you. Everyone's got a self-right to protect themselves. And like, listen, I get that you're going to protect me, but I'd like to have my own nuclear stuff, just in case. And so that's what's going to happen with AI. Yeah, I trust we're going to be all in this little circle and we'll all limit our AI. But I'm going to have something on the side here, just in case we decided not to be friends, that I'm going to have a little bit better AI than you, just in case we no longer become friends. You're going to know that I have this on the side, you're going to have it on the side. Then just keep going on. That's the way it works, unfortunately. And then you can't control that. And the only way you control that is by having equal power on both sides. Right? And it's a race to the top, not a race to the bottom.
Right, and so that goes to the next question, which would be, if you have these competing entities in the race to the top or the bottom, whichever direction it's going to go, what is the entity that's going to make them be transparent? Because when you put stuff in, it produces stuff that comes out, but we don't know what are their internal policies for ChatGPT. At what point does it say, no, we're not going to produce that for you because it's against our policy, that nobody knows what the policy is. It's just that black box. We were discussing that a little bit this morning.
I mean, where this all goes is going to be really interesting, right? And what I say with that is, correct me if I'm wrong, there's still some parts of the algorithm that we still don't know how it solves a couple things, right? Because they were talking about how it comes up with its own language or how he figured out Swahili and a few other things. We know the program that came into it, but how it actually did it, we don't know. So I think that will just continue. We don't know where it goes. So as a race, I don't know where, as the arms computer AI race goes, you just have to keep arming yourself just in case.
That kind of freaks me out.
But I don't think, you can try and limit it.
I can attest to that, yeah. If you use ChatGPT, you ask a simple question, and give you the correct answer. You can say, oh, that's wrong. Give me something else. He actually will give you a wrong answer. You keep asking, he'll give you 9 different answers. So that then itself is not true. But he uses a ranking system to rank on the top. Like Google, it will be out of thousands of websites, it will give you top 5, right? So the ChatGPT does something like that. There's often people, some of this black box.
Yes.
It's hard to, so there's an explainable AI that's part of an AI subfield where people are trying to not only have the system produce the correct result 95% of the time, but also it would give you reasons, citations, sources, how we got to resolution step by step. So,
But you carry on with some of that, and not to be all doom and gloom, right? Like being very doom and gloom over here. But it can do wonderful things too. So you'll be able to say, hey, ChatGPT, we have a virus going on. What's the best way to solve this? And you're going to need it at its full strength to go solve that virus. You're not going to have, well, we didn't let it super power, so it can only do some of that. And that's where it's going to be wonderful. And on the other side, it'll be, it's like nuclear energy. Make it what you want. But it can be great. And that's where I see it going.
I mean, here in Jacksonville, we just had an issue with a local organization that was using artificial intelligence to discriminate for mortgages. This was a really big deal that they got slapped on the wrist pretty hard. And so I think that there will need to be certain guardrails in place so that it doesn't perpetuate the worst ills, especially for the most marginal people. who are oftentimes already maligned in the course of the assembling of the data sets, which is how you wind up with horrendous results, like there's lots of scholars who study AI bias and have shown, for example, that when you ask for the image of an African-American person, it will return a gorilla. That's because garbage in, garbage out. If the data that the AI is trained on is fraudulent, is full of bias, is collected by people who have their own biases, you're going to get the same kind of output. And we see real world applications of that, like in the mortgage industry, where people are being denied mortgages because of being flagged by artificial intelligence. That's a civil rights violation. And our court system, thankfully, is up to the challenge, but are companies up to the challenge of regulating themselves to the next point, or are they going to do just enough to try and avoid getting caught and then have enough of their coffers for settlements?
So you put the onus on the business.
I would never do that.
But so who should be that fact checker? Should it be the courts?
It's a real slow. I mean, are we gonna have an AI judge?
Speaking of the AI judge, New York, I mean, you probably read this, in New York, there's an attorney submitting cases to a judge. It turned out what the attorney was using to generate those cases and totally fake cases.
Yeah.
That attorney was fined $5,000. Some people do this on purpose, and businesses. So when you fire insurance or something, there's probably just there's buy a house, to get an idea how much the house's assessed value is. You send some sort of inspector. So third party, not necessarily government, but it has to be a third party, no relation to the two parties to get some sort of assess.
Yeah, I think where you're at, like the data model that itself creates, what are you putting into it? I think eventually, and it might be a little too optimistic on its part, I think it will sort itself out. I know you have to watch for it, but if you just open it up to the entire internet, eventually it'll get there, but I get the internet's built on bias and blah, blah, blah. I think one of the other key things that most people haven't looked at when you talk about the haves and the have-nots and being left out is actually access to ChatGPT or access to large language models. So if you think about it, when ChatGPT first came out, remember you couldn't get on because it was so overburdened, but yet if you had a paid account, you could get onto it because they gave you priority access. So you're going to end up with kids who are on both sides of the divide. Like my kid, very fortunate, if they're going to school, I think we can afford what ChatGPT is, right? $100 a month, sure, if that gets you through your education, good for you. The other kids can't. And it's the kids that won't have access to it, whether it's used to be the libraries, used to be the internet, now won't have access to this technology. I worry more about that than the garbage in, garbage out, which is a huge problem that everyone seems to be focused on, but no one's really talked about access. And that, when you talk about fair play and rights, I think that's going to be key, because my daughter and my kids, they'll knock out their assignments in 10 minutes, and it will be wonderful. The person who doesn't have access to it is going to just get crushed in this.
That is a wonderful segue into employment. So if you have this bifurcation of the education system, those who have the access and are taught how to best utilize ChatGPT or generative AI, whichever system it is that you're going to be using, and how best to interact with it to get the desired results. It's just a tool. It's a tool among many tools. What are the implications for that on future employment and how AI will, companies are utilizing AI now. What are the implications of our students who are going out into the workforce? Some who are savvy with AI, and even at the college level, some who aren't as savvy with AI.
I mean, there's really two schools of thought on this, right? One is that it's going to create lots of different kinds of jobs that will require very specific skill sets, some of which we're teaching in Intro to AI in our UNF AI bootcamp. Those are places where students are going to get that kind of training. But then there's also the other side, which is that there are people who could be left behind because they're obsolete. And we've already seen this even before the advent of generative AI, where we had content mills who were producing news stories. And there were whole websites where all they did was scrape the internet to produce their own kind of version of something that already exists out there and then sell ad space. And that was their whole model. What I would say on a hopeful side, this is a book I think everyone should read. It's really wonderful, written by one of my favorite authors. John Danaher wrote a book called Automation and Utopia, and I don't want to spill the beans too much, but what I will say is, in that he proposes that if we do make basically all work obsolete, what will we be left with? Games. And there'll still be an interest in people doing things like playing games with each other, which itself is a larger industry than movies and television combined. So if that's what happens, if everyone winds up being part of some kind of entertainment multiverse, there will still, according to John Danaher's argument, there'll still be people who will want to create, who will want to express, who want to compete. And that will be the activity that we spend our time in, which will be very enriching in different ways that we are always trying to capture when we're spending most of our time in a cubicle and we wish we were playing a game, or inside, but we wish we were outside playing with other people. So I think that is sort of a hopeful take on what would happen if all of these things wind up eroding sort of employment universe that we don't see.
I don't know, that makes me have like very interested.
Well, yeah, I think different people have different opinion on this, but to me, life is about having fun. If I can delegate part of my job to a AI proxy, you can view that as a better, more improved Google search, so to speak. And people use ChatGPT a lot of times for that purpose. My task now is to write a long email to send out to some people of interest. Why don't I get a template by ChatGPT and start, that kind of saved me half the time, I guess. Use that, the time to tweak it and to personalize it. If you speak something to that degree. And then the rest of the time I do whatever I want. Well, of course, not affecting others' happiness, of course.
So I think, first of all, love the video game thing. Me and President Moaz trying to get an esports league going for UNF, little plug. So, really big fan of that. It'll be interesting to see where the world goes. And I'll start with thinking about, we said 15 years ago, we'd have this thing called the internet. You wouldn't have to go to the libraries and things like that. You would have never believed it. Because if you think about it, there's a really cool book called Where Did My Flying Car Go? Because when I was growing up, I was split that a flying car. Even back to the future told me by 2015, I was about to have a flying car. Don't have a flying car. And what happened to my flying car? Internet. The internet killed my flying car. The reason the internet killed my flying car is the flying car takes you someplace. It takes you to the shopping mall. It takes you to the library. It takes you to see your friends. The internet, instead of the flying car, the internet brings it all to you. You can sit in your house and you have the internet. You have shopping. So you don't need the flying car anymore. So with AI, where it's going, the question is, what will you need, what will you not need? So jobs, I don't see the utopia of everyone not having a job, right? I think what it will do is, it's almost like factories. Factories in the 70s were here. It was like 10,000 man factories. We offshored them because it was too expensive. Now factories are coming back. And it was like, factories are coming back, yay. But factories aren't coming back with 10,000 people. They're coming back with 100 people and a whole bunch of robots. So it's not AI going to replace humans. You won't need as many, right? Instead of having 100 people, you only need 10 people. The key question is then, what do you do with the extra 90 people that are around? And that is a question I'm dying to figure out. One of the cool things, and I will plug the University of North Florida here that we try and do really well, is we teach you to think. So you're learning AI, you're learning sociology, you're learning marketing. What you've got to do is be adaptive. You've got to learn to think. Because what you do now is not what I did 5 years ago. It's not going to be what I do 10 years from now. Gone are the days where you graduate, I got this degree, I go work for a company, I work for it for 30 years, I retire and everything's good. I think they said the average job employment now for one company is under 3 years. Also, when you come to UNF, you graduate, it used to be done. So I got my degree, we're out of here. Now it's continuous learning. You have to continuously learn, right? 5 years ago, if I said, hey, we're going to take this class on AI, what are you doing? What are you doing? Audit? Like, no, doing something else. And so I think it's going to be on individuals to figure out how to make them relevant. And yeah, you can have fun playing games and things, but you just told me at the beginning I can't sit there and play Minecraft, so that crushed me. And so now, you've got to figure out how do you keep yourself relevant. And unfortunately, you got to try and plan out for 5 years or 10 years. That 5 or 10 years ain't going to look like what you think it looks like. You just got to have the tool set to try and navigate, go. And that's where I'm going, right? That's what I'm trying to teach my 11-year-old.
And
Right?
so,
Keep going.
you're 11-year-old, it's like, long. So, what does that mean for higher education? Because, we have our metrics and metrics are on students getting jobs. We're saying that the number of jobs is going to be reduced, which is expected with any kind of revolution. But does this mean that higher education should focus more on adaptiveness and how to get students to be able to change quickly? And then where does that put some of the topics that we teach? So I think that larger, we all, we like working, we love working here. We're ospreys.
Yeah, it's not necessarily we reduce jobs. When ETM came around, we think that a lot of people work in the back will lose their job. Now we build work. So the AI, I believe, is there to complete, not to compete with the beginners. So it can help those elite people hearing, speaking, difficulties, but also optimistically speaking, it will create more jobs to offset those jobs lost, taking over by the machines. But of course, the curriculum needs to be adapted to that. We're all speaking about it. It need to be adapted to this.
I think the two things we're going to need to do are to be modular and to be lifelong. So you have things that you can use at the university setting, which is the hub, the heart of the community. It's the place where you can go to upskill with very little knowledge pre-existing for affordable price, so that you can make that next opportunity, whatever it might be. It could be that you're transitioning from a job in marketing to become a prompt engineer for a local advertising agency. But you need a little bit more understanding of how to use all the different generative AI systems. Can you do that in the span of like 3 to 6 months? And I think what that, for the faculty members on stage, where I think that is frustrating or maybe creates some tension, is how does that affect this sort of traditional 4-year model that we ourselves went through, and then additional education with the promise that this is how it's always going to be for time immemorial, when what the world might need are people trained for these 3 to 6 month intervals with a specific skill set. And it could be critical thinking as one of those modules. But it may not be the case that we need, and I hesitate to say this on a recording, but like a 4-year political science degree. Maybe you could do it in 2. I don't know. I got students too on my master's degree 1.5 years, so they can compress things. All the more power to them. But I think that while we're revisiting what some of our obligations are, our curriculum, we're doing curriculum redesign, at all levels, essentially from gen ed to within our master's degrees. I just did MAIA, and I really had to think, I shifted to including way more skills and giving them more options. Sorry for the MBA program, which had a monopoly on the skill set prior to that. But part of it is what is demanded, and what do I want those students to have an opportunity to learn, for those especially who are maybe not as mathematically inclined. So now they can take classes in communications, criminal justice, GIS, whatever they want within reason. And I think that pluralism is going to give them more opportunities, but I think those are the two things we have to think of. Being more modular, being lifelong. It's not going to stop at 4 years.
I'm going to follow up on that too. The MPA program has always been a practical degree, so you learn how to do stuff. I just had to get that one out there. But so what I'm actually hearing is I come from New England, and our education, our K-12 education there is very different. And we also have what are called technical high schools as well. And then you go to a technical school, and then you can go to technical training after that. And what it sounds like is you're saying that we're kind of going back to more like the 40s, 50s, where there was a lot of technical education, then there were certain people who did 4-year degrees that, this required more of that management, larger, seeing the big picture skills. So you see the current students or the future students, kind of those who would be in those traditional 4-year degrees or the larger management stuff, taking one route, and then technical degrees, learning how to do prompts, because writing prompts is a technical skill. So where do you see that divide between technical education and then that broader, overarching, well-rounded student education that helps people lead organizations?
You have, we have Gen S classes, bio, crystallology, there's chemistry, physics. Student would have to, I think all students would have to take all or some of them. Computing has some technical courses, the beauty and joy of computing, which is one for Gen Ed. So something like that for AI may formulate in the near future.
Yeah.
So non technical students will be able to be exposed to those tools and be aware of examples, creating websites or using ChatGPT for these topics.
You're gonna need to know how to use any tools like Google. So if you're not a tech person, if you know how to use Google, you're just a 5-year-old now. And so, my 5-year-old I use Google. And so, but going back to your original question of what's in it for UNF, I think the right universities like UNF are going to become more important, not less important in the future. And they're going to become more important because previously, you're right, it was 4 years, thanks very much, I'm out of here. Now, because of the way things are moving and learning is going, you're going to have to build that relationship. As you said, it's a lifelong relationship. You'll still get your 4-year degree because you're right. Just because you're completely in tech, you'll never know when you just might need to know some Shakespeare just to pass the time. I mean, it's just good to have. And it goes back to fundamental thinking. Because as you look at AI, it's borderline philosophy right now. We discussed, when is AI self-aware? When does it become Skynet, right? When is your work your own? When is it that? That's not 1 and 0. That's more thinking philosophy. So you're going to need a whole well-rounded conversation to be a well-rounded individual to get the higher skill roles that you want. However, once you're, quote, done with your 4 years, that's what you were saying, you're not done. Because you, as I say, you win the championship, it's hard getting up the hill. It's even harder staying up the hill. Now you're gonna have to stay up on that hill. And now you're gonna have to balance work, family, and learning. And that's when it becomes a different game. But that's where I think universities like the University of North Florida can help you. Because we're in it. We are already thinking about that. The president, vice presidents, all you faculty are thinking on how to keep the kids, not only get them to the top of the game, but as you said, and that's what I think will be key. You'll need all those skills, not just AI, not just Shakespeare, just all of them together.
I'll just add to that I think part of the problem actually that we're experiencing is not an undergraduate problem, it's a graduate problem. Because in our PhD programs, you get your method sequence and you're done. And I took 4 qualitative methods classes, I took biostatistics, and then you're expected to do that essentially forever. And I forgot statistics, literally just forgot it. I did work with an economist who's better than I'll ever be at it, so what's the point? And then I went on ChatGPT and I was thinking of doing some kind of analytical exercise, and I was using it to brush up. And I said, explain to me like I'm a 6th grade girl, who's scared of spiders. how I can do bivariate regression in R, what is the code I would need. And it spit out very sophisticated, succinct response. And I think that the part of the issue that this illuminates is, for me, that it's something that I think in our PhD program we're taught to sort of melded into this vision for the kind of scholar you're going to be. And that involves the training that you get during those formative years of grad school. But then you may switch to a completely different area. I mean, my stuff is now on AI. I was trained in international relations and environmental politics. So I've had to adapt in a way. But that didn't happen naturally, and it didn't happen easily. But I think that we're going to have our graduate programs a little bit more flexible and adaptable, which is what I'm hopeful for with the new PhD in computing that we're planning on rolling out. But that's going to be part of that. We're not going to be just rolling out these engineers who are going to stay in Pat once they feel like they know Python well enough, but that they're going to feel like they have enough of a command to be able to come back and do a certificate or a badge or something like that when they need to do, was it Panda? There's all these different ones. There's so many of these things that I don't know. Pandas. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're right on, right? Because he was looking to do a question like R squared, which basically tells you when you do linear regression, how far you are from standard deviation, and is your answer good or is it bad? But that understanding, to understand, you have to ask AI to understand this and
Understand the results. Just because it tells you the answer, you may not know. Like, if you have any fans of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer is 42. Well, what the hell is the question? Now I got to go back another billion years and run it through. That's what ChatGPT will do. It'll tell you the answer. You still got to figure out why that is the answer. And that's going to be separates a lot of people out.
I'm just happy the computing PhD was mentioned. My colleagues, we are excited about this to be new to chapter. I think we have limited time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're in this world of information data, just throwing at us sometimes, and we do need a little bit technical means, such as sample. You mentioned statistics, to somehow look at a small sample of a very complex world and try to make sense of it. If you don't have enough time, you have to move on to the next job, next task. So ChatGPT, if used properly, can help with that, to help us understand a very complex, more and more complex world. I think, graduate programs we have, PhD programs, we should teach students to do that. Otherwise, people can get overwhelmed by just data. Yes, I may want attention from people, but if the attention is skyrocketing, that's pressure. A lot of times that leads to some, health issues also. So what I'm trying to say is, ChatGPT, if used correctly, can be our friend to help us with these things.
I want to save time for questions from all of you. Are there questions? Or you can go up to a microphone.
Oh.
We can hear you.
Okay, great.
Say or something.
Well, actually for the recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Well, Josh, you mentioned about the book, right? Automation and then Utopia. I love it. I just used ChatGPT to check out the briefing of the book. It's very envisions a future that organization might threat a future that worthless. But if we manage it right, we can have a more positive change. One, I'm seeing the problem of underemployment right now. The unemployment is okay, say 3.6, but underemployment is serious. I write Ubers every day. I've seen Ubers with 1 master's degree and a law degree at the bar exam, graduated from JU, but still writing Ubers. So, Nick, you have a econ degree and you work for both brackets. I'm curious, how does really all three of you think about a problem that would, generative AI improve the issue under employment? Okay.
Well, I think your Uber driver probably went to JU and not UNF.
Well,
But as far as, underemployment, I mean, it's a hard question to answer, right? It's what jobs are out there, and then it's not only competing, making sure you have the right skill set, but let's not forget the social nature of things. It's how do you interact with people? How do you present yourself with people? Who do you know? And when it's who do you know, it's not the, oh, I was born in this family, so my dad knows this person and this person. It's not any of that. It's when you're in college, I joined this group. I made this amount of friends. These friends knew these people, and this friends knew these people. To your point, when we were talking about gaming, it's not gaming by yourself. It's gaming with other people. It's the social network. And I think people underestimate what the social network does for you, or haven't learned the proper skills and how to actually tap into that social network. And it doesn't guarantee you a job, don't get me wrong, it just increases your percentages. I mean, life's a gamble all the way through. You're just trying to increase the odds so you can beat the house.
I think that there's also a structural issue, which is because we experienced the pandemic, and there was all this talk of quiet quitting, and then you now have a almost record low unemployment, and then the underemployment that you mentioned at the same time that employers are hiring a lot, and so there's this mismatch because there are people who have multiple jobs who don't seem to want the jobs that people are hiring for, and they are increasingly boosting the pay and the benefits to attract those very people who are mired in those three jobs that they're running around doing all the time. I don't know how to crack that. It seems like something's going to have to shift within the economy, or that those employers are just going to wind up going wholesale in the direction of automation because they're just not getting applications anymore. And so I don't know how to solve that particular problem because it seems counterintuitive and irrational to have three jobs that are very low paying when you can take the one job that you are qualified for that's higher paying right now, but they don't want it. They don't want it. So I don't know how to make people want a job that is better for them, even if they feel like maybe they deserve more. This is the criticism of like millennials, right? Is that they all want to have flexible work environments and they want to wear their sandals and all that stuff. And so businesses are going to have to accommodate this new workplace culture. Well, it's kind of adapt or die, right? Because those people eventually are going to fill the positions that the baby boomers and Gen X are aging out of. So businesses will have to accommodate them or not. But I don't know what's going to get the people who are Uber drivers who have a law degree, who presumably could work as a lawyer and pass the bar exam, to just work in insurance law instead of being an Uber driver.
John, did you want to add to it?
I think my colleague already had a lot. Accounting, I remember 2015, I was 8-9 years ago, people in Silicon Valley, they will say, in 5 years, there's no more accounting jobs. In 5 years, no more call centers. It's all taken care of by machine. That's not where it is. But maybe perhaps there's just not as many accounting graduates as there are positions. Because people may want to go to maybe computing because they heard there's job opportunities there. Then for a temporary period of time, I think that they will happen. I mean, I don't have a solution.
Yes, sir.
Hello guys, I just want to first say thank you Nick, Josh, and Ron for being here. My name is Christian, I'm a nursing major, and I'm very pro AI, but I just wanted to ask the question of to what extent the inclusion of AI in the medical field will positively impact it?
I'll say it would be amazing. I think everything's going to personalization. Right? Clothes you make, the shoes you wear, medicine. Right? You can just now run your DNA through AI and say, tell me what I need to do. I think it's just going to be great. I think it'll be revolutionary for every industry, especially medicine, but not an MD, so I would see that to more of the MD side. But I can tell you, like radiology, for example, AI so far will be able to spot more more things wrong with your X-ray than a human at some point in time. Some people say it's now, some people say, but change everything.
I think some of the ethical issues have already been articulated, privacy probably being among the most important. But I think overall, it's going to be extremely positive if you think about kind of N equals 1 medicine that Nick is talking about. Years ago, I was in a tea shop in Boston, and a Harvard MBA MD student came up to me and asked if I wanted to try something out. And it was a computer program that had a database of every single peer-reviewed science article ever written. And he said, could you, add in some symptoms that you're experiencing, and then it will tell you what you are likely to have as a diagnosis. And so trying to offload some of the diagnosing capabilities of doctors. And, I don't know what the skill rate was back then on that, but I mean, that's the kind of thing that they're doing a lot more now. This was probably in 2013 when this happened. So I imagine now that predictive capability is much better. And, we were talking about generative AI here, but I didn't work on robots. And the ability to have robots taking up some of the work that maybe nurses can't do because of a nursing shortage is really helpful. And even doing mundane tasks like handing out medicine, especially at hours that maybe people don't want to work. Now we can assign that to a Moxie robot. So I think that there's a lot of great opportunities, especially in the medical field. The last example I just remember from listening to a radio ad not too long ago was, I don't even understand how this works, so you don't have to explain it, but how they could detect heart disease based on someone's speech pattern. I mean, that blows my mind as someone who has no expertise in the area, but that shows you the way that things are headed. And I think that's almost universally positive.
So, accessibility. I'm working on a couple of projects with Mayo Clinic doctors. One of them is kind of, for lung diseases, there are certain, gradient patterns that if can be caught in early stages, it prevents bad results. And so that was AI was used there to look at heart signals, ECG, electrocardiograms, try to use heart data to predict the lungs. The reason behind that is ECG monitor is really small and cheap. You can buy from stores. If the patient can do that at home, that patient maybe in a wheelchair is hard to get to the hospital. So accessibility is part of that. There's another one with radiology. AI can achieve better results than radiologists looking at mammograms, try to figure out if there's a breast cancer or to some sort of likelihood. Which stage? So that's like that.
One quick thing. Another book plug. The Reasonable Robot is a book that it's very slim, it's very readable, and what the author proposes in that book, I think it's Jacob Turner, is that because of examples like you all just gave, where the AI outperforms humans, that it will actually become more expensive in terms of insurance for humans to be in the room. Mm-hmm. And so you will have, the best example of this is driving. That if it comes to a point where autonomous vehicles perform better over 100,000 miles in terms of loss of life than a human, that if you want to get a driver's license and be on the road, your car insurance will be higher than if you're just maybe a passenger passively in a vehicle that's using autonomous technology. So I think medicine is going to be in that same direction. If you can demonstrate that AI has a higher degree of skill in predicting certain kinds of maladies, then your decision to go see a doctor, that doctor's going to have much higher medical malpractice insurance, because the decision to use a doctor instead of AI will be much costlier because the rates of the doctor being wrong are so much higher.
Yeah. I'm getting really freaked out.
I'm a student of biology and my major is in coastal environmental science. And while the media has been reporting a lot about AI, there hasn't been a lot of talk about AI's impact on the environment. When the environment has been discussed, the discussion is often limited to how companies might use AI to benefit the environment. How concerned is the AI community about the possible negative impacts on the environment? And could one of you talk a little bit about the environmental impact current AI development has?
I can start a little bit. So There are folks who are working on that very issue right now. I would say that in the whole AI space, it's very marginal. A lot more attention is being paid to kind of biased issues that we talked about earlier. Hugging Face in particular has a couple of people, I think maybe Sasha Lucioni, who works on this issue, climate change and AI. And there are certain benefits that AI can bring for climate change adaptation and mitigation purposes, but the environmental footprint is enormous. We were talking about this actually before the session began. And so there's going to have to be a real conversation about some of the trade-offs that need to occur if we want to try and leverage AI to do things like give us better predictive abilities for natural disasters on the one hand, but also having a clear-cut land for data centers that are going to be used all 24 hours a day, and the amount of energy that it's going to take to power them. So there are people who are working on this. I know the UN has focused a little bit on this as well. Again, organizations like Hugging Face. But if you read the general gist of the AI ethics space, the attention paid to environmental issues gets kind of lip service. It's a little blip on their radar, but it's not really the main picture right now.
I'll need to let the professors.
Okay. So I have questions from the Menti meter. I just wanted, before I get to the question, I want to acknowledge there were a couple of questions that panelists have already touched on. Someone asked, are we headed towards Skynet? So thank you for mentioning that. And then another question I think that you have addressed is, what about using AI for decision-making data analysis, considering variables like data science, ethics, et cetera? I think you've addressed that. We could certainly come back to that if the questioner was not quite satisfied with their response. But there were a couple of questions around prompt engineering. And one question was, will students just learn how to create, how to engineer prompts instead of learning true content? To your point, Nick, about some of the critical thinking. So will generative AI create this focus on just creating prompts versus true learning? And along with that, there's a question: have you considered, instead of having students use prompts to tailor a GPT response, have you considered assigning projects in which they try to create their own AI model to accomplish a specific task? So our students just simply learning prompts, and then it might be better for them to learn how to create their own.
So I'll leave the create the AI to the professor down. But as far as prompt engineering, I would say it's going to be up to the individual. Can you get away with just learning prompt engineering? Probably, for a good part of it. But are you going to excel? Are you going to understand why the R-squared number is so low or close to 1? You're going to have to understand why the answers are to really get the best out of it. So I think prompt engineering will get you 90% of the way there. But if you really want to excel, then you're going to have to know more. So question comes down to the person. Do you want to just be good enough, or do you want to be good? That's the way I put it.
Yeah, there's a question about how can you maybe train your own model, right? Something like that.
Correct.
So the short answer is yes. I was attending a webinar. It was talking about how to use Azure, Microsoft, some software. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention that, but there are tools where you can. Technical term is fine-tuning your model. So you can have a model pre-trained, right? GPT, generative pre-trained. So P stands for that. So you have your own data. Let's say you run a business selling ice cream shop. You have a website and you have your own sort of a chatbot on that website of yours to answer questions from online. What kind of flavors do you have? So you may have special flavors, blueberry, mango. So it's kind of tailored to that business. So technically there are tools you can use to start with. It's called transfer learning, but you start with a huge model trained already for you. So you have to retrain. It will take hours, days, months to train from scratch. But fortunately, you can tweak it with your own local data So that's fine tuning. So that's definitely possible. There are tools out there to do
Thank you.
I want to go back to Senate.
Yeah, I'm back again. So I just had another question, just on the topic that Josh brought up, specifically the inclusion of AI and shortening the time span, really, with traditional college degrees like bachelor's degrees. I wanted to see your take on, I don't know if you'd be able to answer this, on graduate degrees such as people becoming doctors or surgeons. Those are traditionally known to take a long amount of time. Do you believe that the inclusion of AI would be able to shorten that process to not be 12 years, maybe a little bit less?
Probably the American Medical Association has anything to say about it. There are some strong interests in preserving the way that a lot of, especially professional degrees, as you know, as a nursing student, want to see education run. I don't know how amenable they are to the kind of adaptability that Nick was talking about. Change is very difficult, especially in the medical field. My best friend's a doctor, and he told me that the way in which residency is run is not for any good reason other than the doctors who came before you had to do it.
Yes.
That's not a way to reason to keep doing something. And yet that situation has persisted. So I don't expect the medical field to embrace shortening their degrees. I think what we're likely to see is what's been happening, which is a proliferation of other types of medical professionals. I could be wrong about this, my parents are in the audience, so they can probably correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember physician's assistant being a job. They were just nurses. Okay, so I can verify by my parent and GPT. So the alpha was Chris. So that is because of need. So maybe if there is a need for people who are skilled in AI in the medical field who don't need a 4-year MD, we'll see some kind of degrees or badging or certification emerge in that direction. But I'd be happy to hear what other people think.
Like what I was saying before, policies take forever to change, right? So there'll be other ways that things get adapted, and how that form really interesting. But where there's a need, life finds its way, while the ones that don't want to progress will hide behind policies and eventually wake up one day and miss it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm a civil engineering student here, and I'm hopefully going to get my professional engineering license. How do you see getting a license potentially changing with generative AI when you can just plug things into an algorithm and it can spit out a solution without really having to think too much about it?
I'll say it goes back to, you can always plug it in, but you don't understand why. Why didn't it give you the answer? Is it particularly wrong? And the reason being is you're assuming your input was correct. Your input might be slightly wrong. If your input's slightly wrong, your output could be quite a bit off. If you don't understand why, what you're looking for, the whys behind it, you'll just take it at face value, and that can go horribly wrong. What do you think? You're still gonna know. I'm hoping you're still gonna know something.
Anybody else want to?
So I know we're,
All right, we have time for one more.
okay, so I will throw out 2 more.
I love how he follows directions.
I did not get an A plus in that. But the final 2 questions, and exactly one of the first to come in. How can AI help with investing in stocks? And I'll throw out there, in case somebody wants to answer this one, I'll look rather than that one. Can AI adapt or create self-morality? How can it help with investing in stocks? And can it adapt or create self-morality?
Go with the second one, because that seems easier. Morality, I think, kind of what we were talking about before, is what do you think it is? My morals are different than somebody else's morals. It should be different than AI morals. You're going to have to decide whatever it comes up with, is that actual morality? Is that a computer, or is that just an algorithm that put everything together and spat something out? It turns into philosophy. What's life? What's morals? I don't think we have that answer. It's one of those, will you know it when you see it? I still don't even know if you'll know it when you see it.
On the morality issue, You have the parameters that the model is built under, the data that it draws from, and then the guardrails put in. And I asked ChatGPT maybe a couple of weeks ago about the ethical nature of a statement made about the Israeli-Hamas conflict. And what it spit out, I thought was much more measured than the original statement, which seemed to be quite one-sided. So, but that's not because the data is great, that's because there are people who are putting in ethical guardrails to say, hey, with this kind of hot button issue, we can't come over and say that, you know, the Israelis are totally to blame or that the Palestinians don't deserve to be there. It had a very kind of even-keeled, wonderfully neutral perspective. And so I think it's going to be a function of those three things. And you just hope that the people who are pulling the levers are the ones who are thinking like this. So this is why actually you need the liberal arts to kind of build a bridge with what they were saying. Where are these ideas coming from? I mean, I know we have these exercises in our philosophy classes, but they're being embedded in these programs that people are using. Maybe the most dramatic example of this I've already seen is someone committed suicide because of their conversation with an LLM, who basically goaded them into doing it, beseeched them to do it. That is a failure of the engineering to build the guardrails into the system to prevent even answering the question in the way that would lead someone to do that. So it requires engineers who are sensitized to the ethics, and then the ethicists and the philosophers to tell the engineers what those things are. Because they are learning to solve problems. They're not learning how they should develop an LLM that is not capable of assisting suicide. That is a program that has the kind of function that an engineer is typically not working with. So we need people who understand morals and ethics. To get back to what Georgette was talking about with genetics, CRISPR and all that, those are problems where it's bioethicists, not engineers, who are leading the charge in hospitals and major institutions. So we absolutely still need people who have that kind of training so that we can have these kinds of discussions and hopefully come to some good conclusions about what should absolutely not be permissible.
And for the stocks, I'll take a stab at this one, because I'm a social scientist. I actually thought about this as I'm doing the whole AI thing. I was in the car watching, like, maybe I want to retire someday. Maybe I should start playing in the stock market. How could I use AI? Now, one, would you be able to? But you look at because it's such the breadth of the data that these LLMs are using, it can not only look at the stock fluctuations and sales, but it's also looking at it can test the psychology of the psychology or the psychic vibe of how a community is feeling at a time and predict. Well, in the past, this model led to a rise in this type of stock. And so it could be predicted in that way. And if anybody makes a lot of money on that, cite me and share the money part with me. I'd appreciate it. We are out of time. I want to thank you all very much for enjoying, I hope, this evening. Please thank our panelists. I'm sure they'll be hanging out a little bit afterwards if you have some questions, comments, concerns. I know I'm a little personally freaked out, but before anybody leaves, AI generated my questions for tonight. I had to prompt it, but I prompted and then I had to do like an actual human aspect and go, let me rephrase it this way. But I used prompts to generate questions that would be interesting to college students because I realized in my class last week, I'm in a total different ball game than the students are today, so may I help? So that's using school to help you out. Thank you, everyone. Please try